Title: The Immortal Divide. Part 1. The Dawn of Eternity. Dr. Eliza Chen's fingers danced across the holographic interface, her eyes reflecting the swirling strands of DNA displayed before her. At 82, she looked no older than 35, a living testament to the revolutionary life extension therapy she had pioneered 2 decades ago. The soft hum of quantum computers filled the air, a constant reminder of the cutting-edge technology at her fingertips. "Run simulation 2749B, she commanded, her voice steady despite the weight of anticipation. The AI assistant, a disembodied voice with a soothing Australian accent, complied immediately. Eliza watched, transfixed, as virtual cells multiplied, aged, and then stopped. A smile tugged at her lips. Another successful test. The lifelong treatment was her magnum opus, a combination of genetic reprogramming, nanotechnology, and artificial organ replacement that effectively halted the aging process and cured most diseases. It had changed everything, ushering in a new era for humanity. Or at least, for those who could afford it. Eliza's gaze drifted to the window of her penthouse laboratory, taking in the gleaming skyscrapers of New Shanghai. The city was a monument to progress, its architecture a blend of ancient wisdom and futuristic innovation. Maglev trains zipped between buildings, their silent efficiency a stark contrast to the congested ground levels far below. Holographic advertisements shimmered in the air, promising eternal youth and vitality to those with deep enough pockets. But even from this height, she could see the stark divide between the sparkling upper levels and the smog-shrouded lower districts. The sight never failed to stir a complex mix of emotions in her: pride in what she had achieved, guilt over its unintended consequences, and a burning desire to bridge the gap. Her reverie was interrupted by a chime from her comm implant, a sleek device nestled behind her ear. It was her son, Marcus. "Mom," his voice came through, tinted with worry. "Have you seen the news? The riots are spreading. London, New York, even here in Singapore. It's getting dangerous." Eliza sighed, a familiar knot of guilt tightening in her stomach. She pulled up a news feed on a nearby holoscreen, wincing at the scenes of chaos. Angry crowds surged against the shimmering force fields, protecting immortal enclaves. Signs bobbed above the throng: life for all, and death to the deathless. The mortal majority movement had been gaining momentum for years, but lately, the unrest had escalated dramatically. Reports of violence, looting, and even terrorist attacks against lifelong clinics were becoming alarmingly frequent. "I'm safe here, Marcus," she assured her son, trying to keep the strain out of her voice. "The security systems are top-notch. Don't worry about me." As she ended the call, Eliza couldn't shake a feeling of unease. She had truly believed her work would benefit all of humanity eventually. But as the years passed and the treatment remained out of reach for most, the divide between the immortals and mortals had only grown deeper. She turned back to her workstation, determined to find a solution. There had to be a way to make lifelong accessible to everyone. There had to be. Part 2. The Depths of Mortality. Across the world, in the crumbling outskirts of old Los Angeles, Maria Gutierrez huddled with her family in their tiny apartment. At 40, she already felt the aches and fatigue of a hard life. Her hands, rough from years of cleaning homes in the immortal districts, absently massaged her lower back as she watched her husband Diego. Once a strong construction worker, Diego was now bedridden with cancer they couldn't afford to treat. The irony wasn't lost on Maria. He had helped build the very towers that housed the clinics that could save him, if only they had the money. Their cramped living space was a far cry from the luxurious homes Maria cleaned. Peeling wallpaper barely concealed the cracks in the walls, and the constant hum of the ancient air filtration system served as a grim reminder of the polluted air outside. A small window offered a view of the smog-choked sky, the gleaming towers of the immortal district visible as distant, taunting silhouettes. Their daughter Sophia, barely 18, was glued to the battered hollow projector. It was an outdated model, its images flickering and sometimes cutting out, but it was their only real connection to the world beyond their neighborhood. Images of the riots flashed across the screen, scenes of violence interspersed with advertisements for unattainable luxuries. "Mama, Papa, listen to this," Sophia exclaimed, her voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. A grim-faced newscaster appeared, the worry lines on his face a clear sign he wasn't among the immortal elite. In a shocking development, a group calling themselves the Equalizers claims to have breached the lifelong database. They threaten to release the formula publicly unless the treatment is made available to all within 30 days. The World Health Organization has called for calm, but tensions continue to rise globally. Maria and Diego exchanged worried glances. They had always taught Sophia that violence wasn't the answer, but they couldn't deny the spark of hope this news ignited. Diego's sunken eyes seemed to brighten for a moment, a ghost of his former vigor returning. "Maybe now things will change," Diego whispered, his voice weak but his eyes bright. He reached for Maria's hand, his touch frail but warm. Sophia's face hardened with determination. "I'm going to the rally tomorrow. We can't just sit here and do nothing." "No, Mija, it's too dangerous," Maria protested, but she could see the futility of her words. Sophia had her father's fire, and the idealism of youth that neither age nor hardship had yet extinguished. "Mama, we've been waiting for change for years," Sophia argued, her voice rising with passion. "Every day, more people die while the rich live on forever. How is that fair? How is that just?" Maria looked at her daughter, seeing both her younger self and a stranger. The world Sophia had grown up in was so different from her own youth, shaped by the divides created by lifelong. She felt a mixture of pride and fear for her daughter's courage. "Your mother is right about the danger," Diego said softly, drawing their attention. "But Sophia is right too. Something must be done." He paused, coughing weakly. "Promise me you'll be careful, Mija. We can't lose you." Sophia nodded solemnly, embracing her father gently. "I promise, Papa. I'll be careful." As night fell over the city, the Gutierrez family clung to each other, caught between hope and fear for what the coming days might bring. The distant sounds of sirens and occasional explosions served as a grim lullaby, a reminder of the chaos brewing just beyond their walls. Part 3. The Pillars of Power. In the sterile corridors of the United Nations headquarters in Geneva, Emergency Secretary General Dr. Adebayo Okafor rubbed his temples, feeling every one of his 70 years. The holographic displays surrounding him painted a grim picture. Stock markets in freefall, riots erupting on every continent, and ominous military movements from several key nations. The room was a hive of activity, with aides rushing back and forth, their urgent whispers creating a constant backdrop of tension. Adebayo's eyes stung from hours of staring at screens, each one bringing more bad news. "Mr. Secretary General," his AI assistant chimed, its voice carefully modulated to be calming even in crisis. "You have an incoming priority call from New Shanghai." Adebayo nodded, straightening his posture and trying to compose his features. Dr. Eliza Chen's face appeared before him, her image crisp and clear despite the vast distance between them. "Dr. Chen, I hope you have good news for me," Adebayo said, unable to keep a note of desperation from his voice. Eliza's expression was grim, the lines of worry on her face belying her youthful appearance. "I'm afraid not, Dr. Okafor. We've confirmed the breach. The Equalizers have the complete lifelong formula." Adebayo slumped in his chair, the weight of the world seeming to press down on his shoulders. "God help us all. Do you have any idea what will happen if they release it?" "Chaos," Eliza replied simply, her usual scientific detachment cracking slightly. "Untested, uncontrolled distribution could lead to devastating side effects. Rapid cellular regeneration without proper safeguards could result in cancerous growth. Neural pathway degradation is another risk, potentially leading to memory loss or even complete personality shifts. And that's not even considering the social and economic upheaval." Adebayo's mind raced, considering the implications. Millions could die from botched treatments. Economies could collapse as people abandoned work, expecting eternal life. The very fabric of society, built on the assumption of finite lifespans, could unravel. "Can you develop a safer, more accessible version?" he asked, clinging to hope. Eliza nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "We're already working on it, but it will take time," Tom, I'm not sure we have. The complexity of the treatment, the need for personalized genetic tailoring, it's not something we can rush without risking catastrophic outcomes. As the call ended, Adebayo turned to his team of advisors, a diverse group of experts from various fields. Options, people. I need options. For hours, they debated strategies, from declaring martial law to complete capitulation to the equalizer's demands. But every scenario seemed to end in disaster. If we give in to the equalizers, we're essentially handing control of the global economy to terrorists, argued the economic advisor. And if we don't, we risk full-scale revolution, countered the sociologist. The wealth gap has become a literal life-and-death issue. People won't stand for it much longer. As dawn broke over Lake Geneva, painting the room in soft, golden light that belied the gravity of the situation, Adebayo made a decision. He would address the world, calling for unity and promising change. It was a risk, potentially exposing weakness, but the alternative was unthinkable. As he prepared his speech, crafting each word carefully with his team, Adebayo couldn't shake the feeling that words alone wouldn't be enough to bridge the immortal divide. The world was balanced on a knife's edge, and the slightest misstep could send it plummeting into chaos. Part 4. The Spark of Revolution. In an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Lagos, Yara Okafor, a strange daughter of the Secretary General, huddled with her fellow equalizers. The air was thick with tension and the glow of computer screens, the hum of powerful servers providing a constant backdrop to their furtive activities. The warehouse was a study in contrasts. State-of-the-art computer equipment sat on makeshift tables of scavenged wood. Sleeping bags and food wrappers littered the corners, evidence of the group's weeks-long vigil. The walls were covered in a mixture of complex computer code and impassioned political slogans. Yara stood before a giant screen, her face illuminated by scrolling data. At 25, she had her father's commanding presence, but her eyes burned with a revolutionary zeal he would scarcely recognize. She had abandoned a promising career in biotechnology, horrified by the ethical implications of her work, to join the equalizers. "It's time," she announced, her voice carrying across the makeshift command center. The dozen or so other members fell silent, all eyes turning to her. "We've given them their chance. Now we show the world the truth." Fingers flew across keyboards, dismantling firewalls and overriding security protocols. On screens around the world, regularly scheduled programming was interrupted. Yara's face, obscured by digital distortion, appeared on billions of devices. "Citizens of Earth, we are the equalizers. For too long, the gift of extended life has been hoarded by the wealthy few. No more. Today, we release the lifelong formula to every person on this planet." As data streamed across the globe, Yara felt a mix of triumph and trepidation. There would be no going back now. She thought of her father, wondering what he would think if he knew she was behind this. Would he be proud of her stand for equality, or horrified by the potential consequences? "Yara, we've got incoming," shouted one of her teammates. "Government cybersecurity forces are trying to shut us down." "Hold them off as long as you can," Yara commanded, her fingers flying across her own keyboard. Every second counts. For the next hour, the warehouse was a battleground of furious typing and tense exclamations as the equalizers fought to keep their signal alive. Yara's heart raced, knowing that with each passing minute, more and more people were gaining access to the formula that could change everything. Finally, as their last server fell to the government assault, Yara allowed herself a small smile. "It's done," she said, exhaustion and exhilaration warring in her voice. "Now we wait." As her team celebrated around her, Yara stepped outside the warehouse, looking up at the smog-filled sky. The world she knew was about to change forever. Whether it would be for better or worse remained to be seen. Part 5. The Edge of Chaos. In the weeks that followed, the world teetered on the brink of collapse. The release of the lifelong formula had acted like a match thrown into a powder keg of global tensions. In the streets of every major city, chaos reigned. Black market versions of lifelong flooded the streets, with devastating side effects. Reports poured in of horrific mutations, accelerated cancers, and complete cognitive breakdowns. Hospitals were overwhelmed, struggling to deal with the influx of patients suffering from botched treatments. Governments struggled to maintain order as economies faltered, with many refusing to work in anticipation of extended lives. Stock markets crashed as life insurance companies went bankrupt overnight. Pension funds, structured around predictable lifespans, collapsed. Religious leaders were divided, some declaring the treatment an abomination, others a divine gift. Cults sprang up overnight, prophesying the end times or promising spiritual enlightenment through immortality. In New Shanghai, Eliza worked tirelessly with a global team of scientists to develop a safer, more accessible version of the treatment. Her laboratory had become a fortress, protected by layers of security to defend against both desperate treatment seekers and anti-immortality extremists. "We're making progress," she reported to Dr. Okafor during one of their daily briefings. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. But it's a race against time. Every day, more people are dying from unregulated treatments. In Singapore, Marcus Chun made a difficult decision. Using his family's wealth and influence, he began secretly funding clinics to distribute the improved therapy in poor areas. It was a dangerous game, risking everything his family had built. "We have a responsibility," he told his skeptical board of directors. "We've benefited from this technology for years. It's time we gave back." Not all were convinced, and Marcus knew he was making powerful enemies. But the sight of suffering in the streets steeled his resolve. And in Los Angeles, the Gutierrez family faced an impossible choice as Sophia brought home a vial of the black market treatment. The risks were high, but could they afford not to take this chance? "It could save Papa," Sophia argued, her eyes shining with desperate hope. Maria looked at her husband, withered by cancer and age. The temptation was almost overwhelming, but the reports of side effects terrified her. "We can't," she said finally, her voice breaking. "We can't risk losing him to something worse." Diego nodded weakly, squeezing his daughter's hand. "Your mama is right, Mija. We must have faith." Sophia's shoulders slumped, but she nodded. As she left to return the vial, Maria and Diego exchanged a look of mingled relief and regret. Had they made the right choice? As the days turned to weeks and weeks to months, a new normal began to emerge from the chaos. Governments, corporations, and international bodies scrambled to adapt to a world where death was no longer inevitable. New laws were drafted to deal with inheritance, marriage, and property rights for the potentially immortal. The concept of retirement was redefined, with careers expected to span centuries rather than decades. Education systems were overhauled to accommodate lifelong learning in the truest sense, but the divides remained. Even as safer versions of the treatment became available, access was still limited. New hierarchies emerged, based not on wealth, but on biological age and treatment status. Part 6. The New Dawn. 1 year after the release of the lifelong formula, Dr. Eliza Chen once again stood at the window of her laboratory. The city of New Shanghai stretched out before her, its once gleaming skyscrapers now marred by the marks of a world that had teetered on the edge of chaos. The city had survived, but not without scars, both physical and societal. The once distinct divide between the immortals and mortals had blurred, yet the undercurrents of inequality and unrest still lingered like a shadow over humanity's future. Eliza's reflection stared back at her, a face that had hardly changed in the decades since she first embarked on her quest to defy death. But something in her eyes had shifted, a weight that had settled deep within her soul. She had achieved what many deemed impossible, yet the consequences of her creation haunted her every waking moment. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of her comm implant. This time, it was not Marcus or Adebayo, but a secure line from Geneva. She answered the call, her posture instinctively straightening as the holographic form of Dr. Adebayo Okafor materialized in front of her. "Dr. Chen," Adebayo greeted her, his voice carrying the weariness of a man who had seen too much. "I wanted to speak with you personally about the progress you've made." Eliza nodded, her expression neutral. "We've developed a safer version of the treatment, one that minimizes the risks of unregulated use. It's being rolled out globally, but the distribution is challenging, to say the least." Adebayo's face remained unreadable, but his tone softened. "I know you've done everything you could, Eliza. The world owes you a debt it can never fully repay. But we're not out of the woods yet. Eliza sighed, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. The new version is safer, yes, but it's still out of reach for many. And there are new challenges we didn't foresee. Overpopulation, resource scarcity, the psychological impact of extended lifespans. We're dealing with consequences that no one could have predicted. Adebayo leaned forward, his holographic image flickering slightly. We're working on solutions. A global summit is being planned to address these issues, bringing together scientists, economists, ethicists, and world leaders. I'd like you to be a key part of it, Eliza. We need your expertise now more than ever. Eliza hesitated, the enormity of the task ahead weighing heavily on her mind. I'll be there, she finally replied, her voice firm despite her inner turmoil. But we have to ensure that this time, the benefits are shared by all, not just a privileged few. The world can't afford another divide. Adebayo nodded in agreement. I couldn't have said it better myself. The future of humanity hinges on the choices we make now. Together, we'll ensure that this new dawn is one of unity, not division. As the call ended, Eliza turned back to the window, her thoughts racing. The world had changed irrevocably, but there was still hope. Hope that they could guide humanity through this tumultuous era and into a future where immortality was a gift, not a curse. Down in old Los Angeles, Maria Gutierrez watched as Diego rested peacefully in their tiny apartment. Though they had refused the black market treatment, the new, safer version had become available to them through a government program. Diego's cancer was in remission, and his strength was slowly returning. Sophia, ever the activist, had become a community leader, advocating for equal access to lifelong and other life-saving technologies. She had inherited her parents' resilience, fighting tirelessly for a fairer world, one where no one was left behind. In the months since the Equalizer's daring act, Yara Okafor had disappeared from the public eye, but her influence remained. The world she had helped create was far from perfect, but her actions had sparked a global movement for equality that showed no signs of fading. As night fell across the globe, from the glittering towers of New Shanghai to the smog-choked streets of old Los Angeles, people looked to the future with cautious optimism. The Immortal Divide had been bridged, but the work was far from over. In the dawn of this new era, humanity stood on the precipice of a new beginning, one that would require wisdom, compassion, and unity to navigate. Eliza closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The journey was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The world had changed, and so had she. This was the beginning of something new. An immortal dawn where the possibilities were endless, and the future was theirs to shape.